And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
It was 1776 when the founders signed the writ of independence from the Brits. It was revolution.
Welcome to the Republic for the United States of America. You may call me Kelby. I am an American. Today is July 9th, 2016, and tonight's featured RNN show, Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel, is going live. The RNN stands for Republic News Network and has been doing these calls for about 6 years. And this has always been a friendly introduction for the people of the United States Corporation. It's true, the United States is, in fact, a federal corporation, and their exclusive jurisdiction lies within the borders of the District of Columbia. And you can find this under Title 28, Section 3002 and UCC 9-307H. The Republic government was just a bunch of U.S. citizens that realized they wanted to be Americans as our founders intended. We've been hard at work now for 8 years and have successfully re-inhabited the original government vacated under Lincoln in 1861. I know, it's hard to understand. Don't worry. We are law-abiding, peaceful Americans and very pro-government. You can consider the Republic members are tired of all the corruption that we see every day. Lord God, we want to thank you for this opportunity to just have a call, a conference, a live radio broadcast, Lord, where the world can hear the truth. So be blessed by our heart, and be blessed by the fact that we're telling the truth, Lord, and we ask that you help us. Help this nation, Lord, be reestablished, re-inhabited, and fully come back under you. And we pray this in your Son's name. Amen. Mr. Dan Happel, I yield the floor.
Thank you, Kelby. This week we've got a terrific program lined up. It's titled The Rewilding and Megacities, and we've got two of the leading experts in the country to discuss this program and this policy that is part of UN Agenda 21. The guests that we have on this week, Tom DeWeese and Pat Wood, are both very highly recognized as leaders and experts in their field, understanding the push for world government and globalization through a process called UN Agenda 21. And with that, I would like to do a very quick overview. A lot of people don't understand that in 1991, with the fall of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev was deposed as the last premier of the communist Soviet Union. And in the process of being deposed, he was moved to the Presidio in the United States by George Herbert Walker Bush, and he was given funds through various foundations, including Rockefeller and Ford foundations, to form the Gorbachev Foundation, which is the parent of Green Cross, which is considered the preeminent world environmental movement in the world and kind of the godfather of the other environmental groups. And I want to quote a quote by Mikhail Gorbachev. This was quoted in a special report. It was called The Violence Project, Its War on Mankind. It was written by Marilyn Brannon. She was associate editor of Monetary and Economic Review. This was in 1996, and this is on page 5. And the quote is, "The threat of environmental crisis will be the international disaster key that will unlock the New World Order," unquote. And that was by Mikhail Gorbachev in 1996. With that, we'll go back a little bit in history to the Club of Rome meeting that was held in 1965. And at that meeting, it was decided that environmentalism and the fear of the destruction of the planet by man-caused global development would be used to sequester resources, and using fear of environmental destruction, decrease Western development, help redistribution of wealth, and move into world government. And I ask people to please, if you don't believe this, read the book that they published in 1972, shortly after that, called Limits of Growth, or Limits to Growth. And with that, I would like to move to our guests and ask them if they would kind of like to do a quick overview of UN Agenda 21, how it was implemented through Executive Order 12852, which is a Bill Clinton initiative under the President's Council on Sustainable Development. And I'll maybe start that with you, Tom. Would you like to kind of give us a quick overview of that and discuss the impact of UN Agenda 21 and sustainable development on our country?
Yeah, sure. It's interesting when they started this process, when Agenda 21 was introduced in 1992, which was the culmination of a whole bunch of previous meetings, and I know Pat can talk a lot about those things, but they always used the same terminology. They said this is a comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of human society. Nancy Pelosi used those exact words when she introduced it into Congress. There's a video on my website that shows her doing that. The President's Council on Sustainable Development, which is what you were mentioning in that executive order, used that terminology. It was used over and over and over again, a comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of human society. When we started to expose what this is really about and get some opposition built and talking to people what it was, all of a sudden that comprehensive blueprint was switched to an innocuous 20-year-old document that hasn't got any enforcement capability. And you mean that suggestion? Well, it was written as not as a treaty. It was not ratified by the U.S. Senate. It was what they call a soft law policy, which means essentially, if you want to get technical about it, a suggestion. But when Bill Clinton did the executive order and created the President's Council on Sustainable Development, that was where they were using government to enforce this, put it in place. And it covers every aspect of our lives. It covers development in our communities. It covers energy use. If you look at the index on the Agenda 21 document, it talks about education. It talks about women. It talks about labor unions. All these things are pieces and parts of what this comprehensive blueprint is about to literally change our society. That's what it is designed to do, and that's what it is doing. It is usurping private property. It is destroying free enterprise. That's one of their major targets. It is usurping the idea of individual liberty and limited government. And it is a top-down control. It is turning our local communities into little Soviets where non-elected boards, councils, regional governments are the ones that make decisions rather than the elected officials that you put in there. And many of the policies are putting in place now, and with the federal agencies that are enforcing them, it is becoming very obvious now that elected representative government is becoming obsolete, is becoming thrown out, and these non-elected councils and so forth are taking over. And that is really what Agenda 21 is about, to change our system of government and to reorganize our society.
Well, with that said, and Pat, I'm sure you would like to talk about how really Agenda 21, in reality, the global government they're talking about is totally different than our constitutional Republican form of government. Their global government, as envisioned by them, is really a government of a communist system, a Marxist system, totally different than anything that we traditionally had as Americans. Would you like to kind of describe how they plan to move into this regional control government?
Well, I would, but I do want to add just a little bit to the timeline on the genesis of Agenda 21. It was preceded in 1987 with a United Nations-sponsored commission called the Brundtland Commission. It produced a book called Our Common Future. That was the first place where the term sustainable development was really popularized or fleshed out, if you will. But Gro Harlem Brundtland, who chaired that commission and also was the principal author and architect of the book, Our Common Future, was later heralded as being the singular source of, dogma, whatever, philosophy, details, nuts and bolts behind what happened in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. This is just, and specifically with regards to Agenda 21. The United Nations is very plain about that today. They hold her in high esteem. Gro Harlem Brundtland was the former Prime Minister of Norway, and then before that, she was the Minister of Environmental Affairs in Norway. So she was picked for this task, but most importantly, she was a member of the elite Trilateral Commission. And the question has to be raised. I'm not going to give a whole history of that, but the question has to be raised. Was she writing this policy on behalf of some plan that the the Trilateral Commission had in mind, or was it just a one-off, whatever she was thinking that year? George H.W. Bush, also a member of the Trilateral Commission, signed the Earth Summit document. It was only an initial. He didn't have the authority to sign it quite yet, but he initialed it. Bill Clinton, when he got elected, actually went further than that. But two things actually happened at the same time that the President's Council on Sustainable Development was formed by that executive order you already mentioned, 12852. There was another executive order right around that time, just a few months later, I think 3 months later, that was numbered 12862, and you can see that's only 10 clicks apart from the first one. That was done by Clinton. It was called the National Performance Review, Reinventing Government. And the concept of reinventing government went hand in hand with Agenda 21, because in order to implement Agenda 21, it would require literally the reinvention of government. And this is what we see today as fruit when we talk about the little Soviets that Tom just mentioned, when we talk about councils of governments that are all over our nation right now, I think in every state except for 2. These types of things have been slipped under our nose and nobody really paid attention, unfortunately. Well, a few did, but not enough. And so this is how we got in bed, if you will, with Agenda 21. It was proposed by a very narrow group of people that used this as a spearhead project. And of course, Agenda 21 ultimately was called the Agenda for the 21st Century. Well, here we are. We're in the 21st century, and the United Nations has carried the ball on this forward. We now have, on top of Agenda 21, we now have the 2030 Agenda, which takes it even further. And, looking to the future, they've got a full court press on right now to implement this agenda in every country on the planet. Now, having said all that, Dan, I forgot your original question.
Well, we were talking about the implementation of Agenda 21 policies and how those agendas are being implemented in local and regional and state governments.
Yes, indeed. Here's the mechanism. I believe that one of the main mechanisms that this has been done through the selective use of non-governmental organizations, commonly known as NGOs. They're not government organizations. So when you hear a term, for instance, like the U.S. Conference of Mayors, you immediately think, oh, that's where some kind of a national thing where all the mayors of the country get together. Must be something that the federal government does for the mayors of the country. No, that's not it at all. It's a private, nonprofit organization. Has nothing to do with government whatsoever. They just sprung up out of nowhere. They got funding from various other sources of money like foundations, and they got some money from the United Nations itself. And you have another organization that sprung up called the National Governors Association. And this also is an NGO, no connection with government whatsoever, funded by all these other sources of not illicit money, but it's off the record money. It comes from these foundations like, I don't know, like I say, like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation now is a big one these days. You have the MacArthur Foundation, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, there's the Carnegie Endowment. There's a ton of stuff out there like that. They're filthy stinking rich, and they give money to these NGOs like crazy. Well, you have these two organizations themselves, the U.S. Conference of Mayors. The U.S. Conference of Mayors created the Joint Center for Sustainable Communities in 1997. Okay, that's where they got started. In 2001, the National Governors Association endorsed smart growth, which became the substitute term for Agenda 21 in America. And these two organizations successfully went out to touch all the governors of every state, all of the mayors of all the cities with this message of sustainable development. And I wouldn't say they shoved it down our throat, but I'll say it. They shoved it down our throat. And here we are today. Now, there have been others. It's not just these two. But these are perfect examples of how this evil doctrine was spread all over our country down to the lowest level, county structures, cities, towns, even into the zoning and planning committees and stuff. It's everywhere you look now in American culture.
You know, Pat, you're absolutely right, and people don't understand exactly how insidious the concept of tax-exempt foundations and NGOs are in the, let's say, redistribution of wealth in our country, because these tax-exempt foundations have been in existence since just right at about the time that the 16th Amendment and the federal income tax became part of our structure. And the big financial interests managed to keep all their money through these tax-exempt foundations from being taxed. And they have no idea. I think average people have no idea how huge and how ungodly rich these organizations are and how much impact they have on our political process. Tom, would you like to talk about how the ESA, the EPA, and all these federal regulations that are limiting development on private property are having an impact on our country? I know that's jumping around a little bit, but I do want to kind of get an idea of how rural America is being really enormously impacted by these federal, and again, they're non-elected, they're administrative agencies that are writing all these laws.
You know, the EPA has become the stormtroopers putting all this stuff in place. They are moving in, particularly in the rural areas. And, you mentioned, I think, the Wildlands project and all that. They call for rewilding 50% of all the land in every state back to the way it was before Christopher Columbus came here. That means that whole communities need to be wiped out. And how do they do those kind of things? People, when we first started talking about this years ago, people said, "Oh, come on, how can you do something like that?" Well, they've got about 1,000 ways to do it. They made up the problem with the birds and what am I trying to say? The out in
different wetlands.
Well, the wetlands and the
Migratory Bird Act and some of those things.
All that kind of stuff. Yeah, my brain just went dead. With the timber industry, putting them out of business. When they did that, they shut down whole towns because the towns relied on the mills. The mills didn't have any trees, so they shut that down. And spotted owl is what I was trying to think of.
Spotted owl, yeah.
Yeah. And the wetlands regulations is another one. One of the ones they're using now is an all-out attack on the use of plumbing and so forth in the rural areas, and they just can't. You can't live there. They make it impossible to live there, and when that happens, then people have to move. And if you look at the maps, and it's not just maps we've created, but maps they've created, it shows these massive mega cities, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles down to San Diego, different places like that. This is where the people are to be herded into, and everything in between has no human activity whatsoever. That is a pretty crazy operation, but they are actually doing it. And now you have, as Pat was talking about with these NGOs, one of them is the National Planning Association, and they all live off of these grant programs. The President's Council was one of the first to do it, and they systematically have put together these grant programs in through several agencies, and they all have these grants were written by these NGOs. They know what they're supposed to do. They have these very specific strings attached. And what happens is that we take we get a new city councilman elected, a new mayor, even a new governor, whatever, members of the legislature, city county commissioners, and all this. As soon as they're elected, the first thing we do is ship them off to these national associations that Pat was describing. And what do? They sit there and they're listening speaking from the podium are these same NGOs. They come up with sample legislation. They come home and they're surrounded by representatives of these same NGO groups, and they're told, oh, do you have the sample legislation? Hey, we've got all this stuff right here in a box. We've got everything. You don't have to think. We put it all right here, and we've got the money for you. And eventually, hearing that enough, these elected officials start to think this is the proper role of government. And step by step, this is how it's put into place. And these NGOs are the key to it. The EPA is one of the major federal agencies doing that, along with HUD and the Department of Transportation. And the EPA is, as I said, has become the stormtrooper out front that just mows down anybody in their way. They're shutting down whole industries. They're shutting down the timber industry, the coal industry, and one of the major tools they use, of course, the fear of environmental Armageddon, global warming. It doesn't matter how discredited that is. They just keep pushing for it, because if they were to admit that global warming was not a problem, then they would have to admit that none of these policies were necessary. So they've got to keep their foot on our throat with those things, using the fear of environmental Armageddon, and cutting back on our carbon footprint, cutting back on our energy use, stopping the drilling of oil, and using only wind and solar power, which don't work, and which, by the way, actually damage the environment more than using oil. So
Amen.
It is, this is how they're doing it.
Yeah, this would be a good time.
You're absolutely right, Tom, in that, and I have to tell you, I know firsthand, because I was for a time a county commissioner in a rural part of Montana, and one of the slides on my Agenda 21 program that I've got on my website shows a planning manual that we were taught, and in that planning manual there are only 3 ICLEI cities, which is the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. There are only 3 ICLEI cities in the state of Montana, and virtually every article in that planning document was written by the ICLEI group that was in charge of that. So believe me, rural America is being attacked in a way that people have no real idea, and all these grants and all this money that's pouring into rural America, the so-called free money, it has so many strings attached you can't imagine. So, Pat, would you like to kind of discuss some of the ideas that go into
I would, actually.
The smart city concepts and transit villages and form-based zoning and some of these other crazy ideas that are being implemented to create the mega cities.
Yeah, you bet. I want to springboard on what Tom just said. All of these programs, everything we're talking about today, I know you cannot bring up a topic today that isn't impacted by what I'm going to say here. In one way or another, we're always presented with some argument from science that their actions are justified because it's science-based. It's scientific. They have scientific evidence, for instance, that the spotted owl can't survive outside of old-growth timber in the redwood forest of California, which is absolute a lie. It was a total lie. They found spotted owls growing all over the place now. They're doing just fine. They're even breeding with other types of owls. They're just doing wonderful. But there's always science that's brought up in the stuff that you have to believe science. You have to trust that we know we're the PhDs here after all. We've got the smarts. We know what we're talking about. You don't. So you have to do what we say. Well, this was part and parcel of original historic technocracy. And I want to read the definition that the Technocrat magazine put forth in 1938 because it fits today and it fits what we're talking about here. It said, and as anybody that's listened to me before knows that when I say technocracy, that's a synonym for sustainable development or green economy. The United Nations also uses that term. But technocracy is defined as, quote, the science of social engineering, the scientific operation of the entire social mechanism to produce and distribute goods and services to the entire population. They're very inclusive about this. They're using this so-called the science of social engineering to impress what they think is right on the rest of the world. Now, they want to distribute goods and services. That's an economic system. That's the economic side of it. Sustainable development is not a political term. It's an economic term, and it is an economic system. So if you think about this just for a second with the megacities, regions and stuff, if you were going to set up an artificially engineered economy that would be modeled for efficiency, where you spend the least amount of effort to get everything done what it needs to be done, would you find it easier to distribute goods and services to essentially an agrarian economy where people are scattered all over tarnation out throughout the hinterland? Or would you find it easier to herd all of the people into a single city and then use that as your distribution hub to distribute goods and services to all the people? Well, option B, what's behind, the second door here is exactly what they're doing. The drive to shove everybody into cities is so that they can be more easily managed for the sake of this twisted economic system called sustainable development. And all of the regulations, all of the policies that are driving people off the land, driving them back towards the cities again and stuff, this is, and by the way, when that happens, of course, you say driving people out of their cars so that they can take light rail and ride bicycles and they can live in the Agenda 21 stack and pack housing units where commercial is on ground floor and all the townhouses are up on the top and you can take the elevator down to the grocery store. All of this stuff is driven by an economic policy behind it. Put everybody into the technate, if you will, into the city, manage them in the city. And from that, you have policies developing, for instance, for smart cities now, where science and technology is going to be used to connect all of the people, all of the things, all of the appliances, all of the workplaces and stuff. Everything is going to be connected via the Internet of Things to make for a perfectly manageable social mechanism that could be driven by the science of social engineering. This is very insidious stuff, guys, as you know. Very insidious. It's very twisted. But behind it all is this economic this twisted economic doctrine that they think they know better than what we've been doing for the last 250 years, very successfully, I might add. But, here we are. And it looks like it's going to be a train wreck, I might add. It has not been the salvation of anything, of, society or the economy or anything else. Everywhere you look, everywhere this stuff touches, you see pockets of corruption, pockets of just economic disaster. And that's what I see. Maybe everybody doesn't. But it greatly concerns me that the more sustainable development rolls out around the world and in our country, the more devastated we're going to be economically and as a consequence also politically.
I agree with that, Pat, and I think one of the things that people forget is how important private property is to Americans. I mean, it really is a cornerstone of our constitutional Republican form of government, and without private property, we don't have much, because private property is also the freedom of thought, freedom of speech, and all the other things that political correctness right now is taking away from Americans. So it isn't just necessarily the house you live in or the car you own, it's everything. And if people really don't think that's going to be a problem, they better wake up. Tom, would you? I know you've been working with groups down in the southeast and in the east on some of these smart growth issues and stuff. Would you like to maybe help fill in the blanks here on some of the smart growth issues that are going on now?
Yeah, let me. You mentioned private property. Let me start there. The thing with one of the things they use in arguing for Agenda 21 and sustainable development is, first of all, overpopulation, and they use as examples. You've got third world countries that are just teeming in poverty with uncontrollable population and so forth, and they use that as their model. Somehow, because they do that in these other countries or have that problem there, the United States has to somehow cut back. I'm still trying to figure that one out. But the real reason that these countries are in such poverty and have such out of control populations is because, for the most part, private property ownership is illegal there. They're not allowed to own it. There's a economist named Hernando de Soto who wrote a book called The Mysteries of Capital, Why It Works in the West and Nowhere Else. And his main premise, as he traveled the world and checked all this out, is that when you are not allowed to own private property, there is no way out of poverty. Private property, the equity that we have in it, so forth, if that is not there, there just is no way to get out. You're not going to get out of poverty just by a job. You also have, under the sustainable development policies, there's a movement, kind of an association there called the Equator Principle. And this is made up of a bunch of organizations like banks, like Bank of America and several others, that have pledged that they will not loan money to finance infrastructure in countries if it's going to damage the environment, if it's not sustainable. So what they have done is they have condemned people to live in their mud huts, walking 5 miles a day to get their clean water, because that is sustainable. And so, the fact of the matter is we don't have a population problem in the world. In first world countries like the United States, like most of Europe, populations are actually going down. The only reason the population goes up is because of immigration, whether it's illegal or illegal. And when you talk with Agenda 21 people, and they things that they've written and so forth, they'll say that the natural migration of people should be allowed, no borders, no nation states. Of course, that's opening the door for a world government to decide everything. And so, that's why they continue to push for this out-of-control immigration. And, the cultures and the nation states, the rule of law in the United States goes out the window, through all that. One of the most amazing things to me, as I've learned as we've gone along with this thing, the number one organization in this country that I would think would be fighting all of this, would be standing for private property, would be the National Association of Realtors. It is their product. They tell us all the time in their advertising that homeownership is the way to build wealth, the way to get the American dream. And yet, one of the major organizations in this country pushing sustainable development, smart growth policies is the National Association of Realtors. And of course, why? They got a grant. They've got money coming into their pockets. They are, part of that whole process. And I call that the walk of shame. And every time I can talk to a realtor, I tell them this, and I advocate that they've got to stop promoting or being part of the National Association of Realtors, and maybe start some new associations or something, that if they need that sort of thing, because this is their enemy, and eventually they will have absolutely no product to sell. They are slitting their own throat. So this is what we're up against.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I know that a lot of the realtor organizations, we've got groups in Montana too, but they're also in the same boat as a lot of public agencies like the National Association of County National Association of Counties, and that group is very, very socialistic, and they promote all these sustainable development ideas, yet at the same time it's counterintuitive to a county that's trying to fund their county government with property taxes. It makes no sense whatsoever, but yet they promote these things. And it's like you said, Tom, it's because you just follow the money, and the money is there. Yeah. Gentlemen, I think we're going to take a short break. Kelby needs to do a short break here, and then we'll return with this right after he's done. Thank you.
A story of a common family. So my daughter asked me a very important question. She said, "Dad, why do you work so hard on this republic?" And I answered her, "Well, baby, the republic as given by our founding fathers is the most important form of government ever given to man." She said, "Dad, why don't you let somebody else do it?" I said, "Well, sweetheart, most of America thinks things are okay. And so long as their lives are not upset, they don't have to care about the important things that are taking place in their own country. Your dad likes to do things. I just don't want to sit and wait for somebody else. And if we didn't have our founding fathers, we wouldn't have this country. They were doers. They wanted something great for their children and grandchildren. And sweetheart, so do I." Ladies and gentlemen, I wish I could say that that's what happens in almost every home of our country, but it's not. Just 8 years ago, as a man who watched an $800 billion bailout given to banks when that money could have paid off every home in foreclosure in this country, which would have resulted in the banks getting the money anyway, I realized that we had a problem. And I stood up and I did something about it. I'm asking you to do something about it. I'm asking you to not just listen to these phone calls. I'm asking you to go to republicfortheunitedstates.org and read the Declaration of Sovereign Intent. Understand what we have done over the last 8 years. Understand what our intention is, what we are desiring to do for the people of this nation, and do something about it. Participate in the phone calls. Participate in building your states. Participate in finding a governor, finding a leader, finding the body politic of people that are going to stand up and build the de jure state. This is what we need. We need you to do something about it. We need you to be doers. Wednesday night of every week, we have a Building the States phone call at 6 p.m. Pacific. We encourage you to get on this phone call and understand how you too can be a doer. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Kelby, and that allows us to get back into the discussion. And what I would like to talk about now is how some of the activities in the western states, things like the Bundy Ranch and Hammonds and some of the public lands issues that are going on in the western states are being implemented and how they are impacting local areas to basically push people off the land, and how we are continuing to gobble up large tracts of land, public land, when we can't afford to manage what we already have. And the federal government is in the process, and also some state governments in the process of purchasing public lands from private individuals. Pat, would you be interested in tackling that one?
Yeah, I live in the West, as you know, and my roots are up in Northern California, as I think you know. And so with an agricultural background, I'm very sensitive to these types of things. The policies of the various land organizations in the West have been to take large swaths of land and put them into a federal portfolio. And basically, once the land is taken offline, it's made inaccessible to humans. In other words, the roads are shut off, gates are put up, signs are posted. You know, it used to be that Department of Fish and Game were our friends in the West. They used to stop by my house every week just to chat. But today they're armed, they carry sidearms, they wear stormtrooper boots. And if they find you doing something that you shouldn't be doing in the wilderness where they have shut the roads, why, they will arrest you at gunpoint and carry you away to prison. This is not good. What's happening here, in my estimation, is that the land that the federal government has seized, not paid for necessarily, but seized, is being put into a portfolio with title that the federal government could do basically whatever it wants to do with it, irregardless of the will of the people. One of the telltale things that we see is a program that's going on right now with the World Bank and the IMF. And that is what they call programs they call debt for land swaps, where countries that are so indebted that they'll never get out of debt, they're going to these countries and saying, we have a way to forgive your debt, but you have to give us your land. And of course, many countries find that's the only way out for them. So they're starting to give up their land to the World Bank, who in turn can shuffle it off to any private party they choose, or to a global common trust, like something the United Nations might set up. But I do believe that since the Constitution has no provision whatsoever for the federal government to own land in this quantity outside of Washington, D.C. and certain ports and stuff around the country, perhaps military bases as well, there's no mandate, there's no provision in the Constitution that the government should own money. So you got to ask the question, why do they own all this real estate? Why do they own over 65% of the West at this point, where they actually, have title over the property? They're not just managing it, they've got title. Well, the only extrapolation you can carry out of this to the end is somewhere, somebody down the line has the idea that this land is going to be transferred in ownership out of the hands of the federal government into the hands of someone else. It could be over the issue of national debt, which is absolutely in the stratosphere. We'll never pay it off in 1,000 years. We're just as bad off as Argentina in many ways. But I think this dynamic is playing with the government wanting to grab more and more and more and more. And now with the Bundy situation and other things like that in the West, now these agencies that are gobbling the land are getting very protective about anything that would disturb their little plan. And Cliven Bundy was a perfect example of somebody who would have disturbed their plan greatly had he ever been able to get his case properly put into federal court where he could force discovery. I think he really understood what was going on. Unfortunately, he's in jail now. And being that I think he's 74, 75 years old now, he may never come out. Don't know that, but I'm saying, you know, you don't put an older guy in jail and just think, oh, yeah, he's got forever to live. He'll have plenty of good senior years to live it out.
Right.
But I think this dynamic has a lot to play in this thing, and maybe I'm just a tad paranoid, you know, about what the BLM and Fish and Game and so on are trying to do in the West. But I can't come up with any other answer that even comes close to plausibility.
Well, you know, Pat, I think you're right, and the reason I say that is that Cliven Bundy was the last of 54 ranchers in that area. He was the very last one. He was the key. And immediately after the standoff there, the Nevada Senator,
Reed.
Yeah, right. Harry Reid, made a big deal about it and how all these Americans that stand up for their property rights are nothing but a bunch of domestic terrorists. There's no reason to do that unless you're trying to strip the rights for private property away from those people. And I think you're right on the money with this.
Yeah.
I really do.
You guys, I know both of you will remember how we used to treat the Soviet Union before it collapsed in '92. Whenever the Soviet Union would accuse us of doing some heinous thing, we would laugh and chuckle. Well, that's exactly what they're doing. That, you know, we knew every time they accused somebody else, there was a smoke screen and they were doing the exact same thing. This was proven time and time again. It became a joke after a while. And I used to laugh with people about that when they say outrageous stuff about the United States. Well, we know what they're doing now because they're accusing us of it. Well, this principle applies here as well with people like Harry Reid and all the crowd, you know, saying that property rights, you know, need to be taken away from people and so on. You know, that's exactly what these people are doing. They say that, you know, that there's nothing going on and they're the bad people. The other guys are bad people. But in fact, they're doing the exact thing. That's exactly what they're doing. They're just stealing the land, basically. They get it for nothing.
Well, they do, and it shows what little regard they have for property rights. And I'm going to quote a policy statement from the UN Conference on Human Settlements, Habitat 1 in Vancouver, 1976. It's agenda item number 10. And the reason I do these quotes is so people can check this stuff out. It's not us making this stuff up. It's what they are saying in their own hand. And this quote is, quote, land cannot be treated as an ordinary asset controlled by individuals and subject to the pressures and inefficiencies of the market. Private land ownership is also a principal instrument of accumulation and concentration of wealth and therefore contributes to social injustice. If unchecked, it may become a major obstacle in the planning and implementation of development schemes, and these development schemes are Agenda 21. So anyway, Tom, you as an advocate for private property, you deal with a lot of these things every day. Tell me some of the initiatives and some of the things that are going on in your realm to try to protect and enhance some of these private property rights.
To try to protect them?
Yes.
Because the greatest assault that we're seeing right now in the cities is this HUD program called the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Rule. We've warned for years that the as I said earlier, these grants come with these strings attached, but they had this pretense that it was still local. With this AFFH HUD program, the smoke screen's gone. It's no longer even a pretense that it's local. HUD is coming in and saying, you will do this, or we're going to sue your community. People may go to jail, whatever, and they're forcing this in place. But what I do see is, and I really think that the AFFH program is kind of a gift to us, because as we said all these things all these years, people didn't believe us, paying attention. So many communities were saying, it's free money, so what do you mean don't take the grants? But now, with this program, we are able to show much more easily what we're saying is true. And it's not an innocuous 20-year-old document now. It's a brand new program right in front of them. Because of that, I am now getting calls from elected officials saying, what can we do? I actually got a call from someone in a planning commission saying, what can we do to keep these programs out? That's a huge move forward. Baby steps, but for us it's huge. And so we're able now to communicate with elected officials, which we never could do before. They just ignored us. And one of the things we're working on right now is to, in the 26th of this month, I'm going to have a conference call for elected officials that understand, maybe not know what to do. They're very confused. They're trying different things, but sometimes they're afraid to move forward because they don't have anybody with them. And we're going to have some experts with us to discuss, and the ultimate goal is to come up with a legislative plan with language that will work and that we can send to others across the country. And it'll take time. It'll take more than one call and everything, but I needed to get something going. So that's, to me, that is a major step forward, which we never had before. I continue to call myself the Pollyanna of this movement because I see victory in little things, and anything moving forward is a victory. And the more these guys stomp down on us, the easier it is to make our case. Now, I agree with Pat. I'm paranoid too, because they are moving rapidly with the slightest little movement on our side to try to do something about this. They are coming down with just as hard a slap as they can, and the Bundys are the premier example of that. But there's so many people. Here's what I'm hearing from some people: it's impossible to fight back. There's nothing we can do about it. I want that word taken out of our movement, impossible. It's either that or just quit and then make sure that it happens. We have to stand up now. A year from now, we may not have the opportunity to stand up. We've got to do it now, and I'm seeing that happen. I'm seeing people begin to challenge and stand up. We've got to stop communities from taking these grants, and we've got to have communities and states begin to stand up for the Constitution. They cannot do this. What they're doing is against the Constitution. It is against states' rights. It is against the community. They have no right to do this whatsoever, except we're giving it to them, and that's what's got to stop.
Absolutely. I'd like to add to that, Tom, just to kind of not broaden or expand, but just kind of add to it a little bit. One thing that is a saving grace to us right now is the worldwide populist movement that is kicking back against regulators, like in the EU, for instance, and even in our own political election with some of the things that Donald Trump is saying. And I'm not supporting Trump either by saying that. I'm just pointing out that people are developing a lot of angst over this pressure they feel. They feel the manacle around their neck. They're upset. They're striking back. And from the reports I read, for instance, on the upcoming Bilderberg meeting this weekend, these people in the global elite are sweating little bricks right now because they see that their experiment may be falling apart. Now, the good thing for us is this gives us space to operate in. Not that all these people know what's going on. They don't know all about Agenda 21 and property rights and the stuff that you and I know, but this gives us a new space to work within that we didn't have before. Now, I think we have a very unique opportunity to push forward in a big, big way this year, maybe into next year as well.
I totally agree with you, Pat. And let me just add this to it as well. As far as the pushback goes, ICLEI, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, was one of the people who created Agenda 21. They made it their mission, their stated mission, to bring these policies into every community in the world. They had over 600 American cities paying them dues to come in and do that. We targeted them, and the reason we did over others was because they were an easier hit because they had a much clearer connection to the UN, so it made it easier to do that. I lost count at 150 cities that we were able to get to stop paying dues to ICLEI. The head of ICLEI USA told an associate of mine, not knowing who he was, my friend asked him, "What do you think about all these groups that are attacking you guys?" The head of ICLEI USA looked at him and said, "Oh my God, we are terrified of those people. We can't stop them. They have taken all these cities away from us, and we can't get new cities in the United States to join us because they've made us political poison." So, yeah, they are very concerned about what we're doing. They're very afraid of it, and for good reason, because we have begun to push back.
Well, gentlemen, this has been a tremendous discussion, and I would like to reserve the opportunity to continue with a discussion like this in future weeks. We're nearing the end of our show. I do want to give both of you gentlemen an opportunity to talk about your websites and other information, books, and so forth that you are doing. And Tom, I would like you to let the listeners know if you've got that conference call number, let our listeners know what that is, and we would invite any legislators or candidates for office that are interested in learning more about this program to get on that conference call on the 26th and join in. And I know of at least a few legislators that I will tune into that call.
Excellent. On my website, AmericanPolicy.org, there is right at the top we wrote a letter the other day to all of our supporters across the country, explaining what the conference call is about. This is going to be an invitation-only conference call. It is just for either elected officials, for elected officials, and we'll include some candidates that are running as well. But I only want those that are open-minded and understand there's a problem and want to do something about it. I don't want to get in any fights on there. I don't want to have any arguments. I want to be able to move forward. Time is limited. So that letter is on the website, and in the letter there is a link. And if you know, as you're mentioning some people you know, you go in on that link and list the name of the elected officials that you think should be on there, and any contact information you can give us, preferably an email, but anything you can give us. We've got about 2 weeks to get this together and get the invitations out to them. I will follow this up with a similar conference call for activists that we'll open up to everybody, and we can share these same things. The point of it is we want to put together a legislative plan that we can then take to others across the country and have it spread. There's so many of these people who want to do something, but they don't know what to do. They're afraid to speak up, and we want to give them what they need to make that happen.
Well, that's a terrific plan, and I know that you've done that before because I've been on your email list for some time, and you have done various teaching conferences and so forth on Agenda 21, and that has been a really terrific program on your part, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Tom, would you like to talk about some of the things that the American Policy Center, some of the projects that you're doing, and then some of the things that you can contribute to people's education, and then turn it over to Pat. Possibly you can talk a little about Technocracy News.
Yeah, we, as I said, AmericanPolicy.org is our website. On there you'll find about a 15-year archive of articles we've written on these issues we're talking about, everything from Agenda 21, sustainable development, global warming, immigration, personal privacy, education, all those things. We set out a couple of years ago, we started having activists say, okay, now I get it. What do you want me to do about it? And I kept saying, I don't know. We haven't gotten this far before. So we started putting tools together. We've got a manual called Agenda 21, The Wrenching Transformation of America. It's got all the background and some things on what to do. We've got a little booklet that's the kind of Cliff Notes version of that, Agenda 21 and how to stop it. We're going to produce more of these as we go along. I have my book, Now Tell Me I Was Wrong, which is a collection of some of these articles we've written on these things, and gives you a good background. And so working with activists, grassroots people across the country, getting the message out, teaching them how to fight back and so forth, that's what we do. So that's what you find on the website.
Okay, great. Pat, would you like to talk about Technocracy News? And I have to tell you, it's the, I think, probably the single best set-up website I've ever seen.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Some of my years of technology experience, I guess, are paying off. Technocracy.news is basically where you'll find everything that I have to say about anything today. I've consolidated all of my other efforts over the years, August Review, August Forecast, even my book website, technocracyrising.com. It all points to technocracy.news now. And I'm telling a journalistic story of how technocracy is working around the world to constrain us and to put us into a system ultimately of scientific dictatorship. People will find my book there, Technocracy Rising, The Trojan Horse of Global Transformation, and to find lots of other information. And my senior editor and myself are pledged at this point, since the beginning of this year, to declare war on technocracy. And again, that means sustainable development. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're taking our education material to the nation. I've been appearing on just tons of radio programs and stuff every week. Hopefully, I'm not selling as many books as I'd like, but I'm reaching hundreds of thousands of people every month through radio media. It's been an excellent source. So that's where they can go, technocracy.news. Find a lot of great articles that I curate from all over the planet, and it will amaze you. It will amaze you. That's all I can say. You just got to go and look at it. Look at some of the articles. Follow along with the stream for about 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It will pop your eyeballs out of your head.
Well, I have to admit, it almost did mine, and I'm very fond of my eyeballs. But you really do have an absolutely superior website, and I think everyone should follow that and go to that website and go to Tom's organization, American Policy Center. AmericanPolicy.org, I believe. Is that right, Tom?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and that will get you in contact with these gentlemen. And thank you both for being part of our program tonight. And I look forward to another opportunity, hopefully in the near future, to have you gentlemen on again, talking about very similar or the same subjects, but maybe being able to expand on it. With that, Kelby, I turn the controls over to you. And thank you, gentlemen, and I thank our listening audience and ask them again to please tune in next week for another program in Connecting the Dots. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Happel. And ladies and gentlemen, it's going to conclude our radio broadcast for this evening. We'll see you next Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific. Good night.